Welcome to the Intelligent Teams podcast, where we interview leading thinkers from business and the sciences of mind to find new ways to help your teams and organizations thrive. I'm your host, Daniel Susser. Welcome, Stuart, to the Intelligent Teams podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Stuart, for our audience, could you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Cool. So Stuart Munton, I've got one of the longest job titles in the world. So I'm Chief for Group Operations and Technology and Scrum Half at And Digital. So it's a very long job title, but it kind of means I'm the CIO for a tech consulting company. So that's what it is, although we try to use different words all the time for things.
Where did Scrum Half come from?
So there's a kind of wholeness to things. So the company's called And Digital, so we have and titles, and the and title is meant to give a bit more wholeness in who you are. I used to run our Agile coaching function and a lot of our delivery functions, and when I moved into our group exec, I got a slightly more abstracted job title, and so I changed my and title to Scrum Half for two reasons. Up until 2 years ago, I still played rugby, but I coach rugby and I watch rugby. And so there's a rugby bit, but there's also the lovely play on words that Scrum Half is sort of like, I still have a hark back to the Agile side of it. So, and although I do look a bit like a prop, I'm actually a Scrum Half, or a kind of heavy inside center at the moment. So that's where it comes from. It's interesting because it also causes lots of conversation when you introduce yourself and you've got a site. If I just went, I'm the CIO, they go, all right, that's what you are. If and Scrum Half leads to a different conversation.
So for our for any audience members who are listening from a non-rugby playing nation, I think it is worth a little bit going into the difference between a Scrum Half and a prop there, because I'm curious about whether that's the kind of role that you see yourself playing. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on on a bit of the distinction between the kind of thing that a Scrum Half would do, and then does that ring true for
a bit? Yeah, it's more to do with the fact that I actually was a Scrum Half. So the Scrum Half is more about connecting one part of the game to another part of the game, distributing the ball, moving the ball around and stuff. Whereas a prop does a very specific set of things within the game in terms of like scrummaging and lineouts and those sorts of things. So it was just because I was a Scrum Half and. Again, I say was. I mean, I still think I can compete, and I haven't played a competitive match for 2 years, but like I still think of myself as a Scrum Half. But the props are much bigger and heavier because they have to do a lot more scrummaging, and the Scrum Halves are generally much smaller. And I've just sort of filled out into a prop-like shape rather than it's actually the kind of job I do.
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I played a tiny bit of rugby when I was at university, and I was mostly a wing because I didn't know what I was doing, and it was my first time playing. And the wing, you can sort of just like grab the ball and run and maybe score a try, which is like a touchdown for any of our. And I once got to play flanker, which is like the back of the scrum. And I looked up on Google, like, what does a flanker do? And it's like, with their long legs and their strong bodies, they will use their imposing physical presence to maneuver the game. And I looked at like all 5'7" of me. I was like, yep, that's what I'll be doing today. And it was very it was a fun experience. But yeah, the Scrum Half connects the runny people at the back to the pushy people at the front, and it's an important one. That's why I thought it might be like CIO relevant there. Yeah. So one of the reasons, the main motivation for inviting you on, Stuart, was of all the people I know in the tech world, you're one of the ones that stands out the most as having really embraced the collaboration between agile teams, humans on the ground, as we have been doing for a long time, and AI and what it can offer and how it can accelerate. I've seen you present at conferences. We've spoken about it. So that's what I wanted to ask you and pick your brain about today. So could you maybe like give us give us like an overview as to what does Stuart think about teams and AI and Agile in the current state of play?
So it's probably best to describe And Digital a bit to start with, because that's kind of where this kind of drives from. So And Digital is a technical consulting company. We provide people who go and build technology, change things, but they generally work in Scrum teams, Kanban teams, micro Agile teams, and crews that we'll talk about in a minute. But those are the sorts of direction we're on. And when we started looking at what we thought is the change that Gen AI was going to introduce, so it's about 4 years ago, we had an offsite with the exec, and we said, actually, what do we think this is going to mean to us as a business? Because we sold, generally, JavaScript developers by the day, Scrum masters by the day, product people by the day. And that kind of model is kind of how professional services have been for a long time, T&M, everything like that. And then once we started to look at actually where do we think this is going, we had to start to embrace where AI is and was and where it's coming to. So it's sort of come to fruition a bit more now. But at that point we were going, okay, what does it mean to our teams and our business model that software will be AI enabled? What will it mean for designers to be AI enabled? What will it mean for Scrum masters to be AI enabled? And what do we have to do to change? And so we kind of started training people. We started upskilling people, trialing all the products. We're like early adopters of everything. So if you imagine a tech consulting company that wants to be at the front edge of this, so we've got partnerships with various different companies. But what we worked out was there is a technological change, but there is also the kind of social and team dynamic change. And the social and team dynamic change is kind of shaped in this concept of convergent. So convergent being that me as an individual can augment myself. I can increase capacity with AI, so I can do more things. So if I know how to do something, I can do more of it quicker. And so there's a capacity increase, but there's also this interesting kind of shape where there's a capability increase. So with the use of AI, I can do things which I couldn't do before. And so we looked at this and we looked at the kind of the shape of where an individual might like span. So an individual can now do more of what they know, and they can do some of what they don't know. And so you look at vibe coding, Lovable, and V0, and all the kind of things that come up that producing stuff. And we went, okay, well, that's good. So personal productivity, in quotes, productivity increases. And that's good. And that was the model from 2 years ago. Ish, we know, okay, looking at that. We then started to go, okay, well, what does that mean in terms of teams? So if I've got a team of AI augmented individuals, so what does that look like? And the pattern that's driving us to is smaller, converged teams. So teams of 3s, 4s, and 5s rather than teams of 10s and 11s. And because some of the work that the mass of the team used to do starts to go, okay, well, we don't need so many software engineers. We don't need so many of those because that is a capacity that can be increased. And we may not need all of the various different parts of different roles because that's a capability that can be increased with AI. And so that's the pattern we kind of imagined, and we started talking about it, and then we started trialing it with us. So we write software for ourselves, but also with our clients about how they are starting to get into these AI augmented micro teams.
So is that what you then AI augmented micro teams? Is that the And Digital way now?
It's how we run stuff internally. So one of my teams like builds our internal products and platforms and stuff. So we write our own SaaS software because you can now, and so we kind of built that stuff through. But I liked the term micro team, and then we kind of stumbled into some of the Dave Snowden kind of work around crews. So actually AI augmented crew is probably the the next stage on. Yeah. So where me as a technologist is reasonably agnostic from the role I used to say. So I used to be a Scrum Master. I used to be a product manager. I used to be a software engineer. I used to be a whatever. I used to have a job title that dictated my boundaries. And now, if those job boundaries are starting to be dissolved by AI augmentation, then I'm one of a team of AI augmented generalists, so humans with AI around them. And then when we looked at kind of some of the crew model stuff that the kind of Cynefin Institute and those guys are kind of put together, kind of like that feels more like where we see the future of teams. So how do they work together? And the difference between a team and a crew being, in a team, you have a position to play. So let's go back to the rugby kind of stuff we were talking about. You are a prop, you do the scrum, you are a scrum half, you pass the ball, you are a wing, you catch the ball and you run with it. Different things, same game, different things. What the crew concept starts to move towards is omni-human being able to apply a role. Yeah. And so each person could do in different situations the same thing because they are either polyskilled as an individual or, as we're seeing, AI augmented to get them to that polyskilled position. And so there's this concept of kind of crews, which, and crews are kind of described like, how a surgery team becomes a thing. Yeah. And they practice, or it's the crew on a boat, or there are kind of ways where they're not quite, they're kind of the level past where a team is, or because I think teams become a little bit of a diminished concept. And that's why I like the idea of kind of trying to abstract and move towards crews.
Okay, so we've gone from like agile teams to micro AI enabled micro teams, and then next step will be we'll like create these crews that work together incredibly well and are able to each bring their own Swiss Army knife of skills and tools enabled by AI to do what needs to be done.
Yes,
How far away are we from? Go on.
And they practice together. Yeah. And so this is one of the interesting things about like how crews get to being brilliant is because they practice. And if you look at how kind of some of the sports metaphors kind of like break down normally when they go between what the sports metaphor says and then what the business is. So sports teams practice much more than they do, whereas business teams do much more than they practice. And so therefore that kind of intentional practice thing is kind of why crews work really well. So it's why coordination works well. You know people, you can do things, you trust them to do the different roles. And that's why crews work. So you need to get to that point. So you need polyskilled people, AI augmented people. But you also need intentional practice. So that people can know that, so I know that you have these skills and I know that person has those skills. And therefore, when we come to do the activity, it works still.
So just to help situate me and I guess my listeners on like where we are on that journey, are you seeing some of the teams that are now look more like crews, or is that more of a hypothetical? How do we create more of these crews? Like where's the reality now?
It's getting there. So the role convergence thing is kind of leading towards that. So if you take the internal teams that we run at End Digital, like we have teams of 3s, 4s, and 5s. They're in the previous thing, they would have had a scrum master and they would have had a product owner. Yeah. But those people have actually converged into the same individual because they're AI augmented. So they can use kind of suitable stuff in, Atlassian Rovo or Miro's AI. They've got the ability to be the same person because they've either increased capacity or they've increased capability with AI. But similarly then with the engineering side, the fact that we don't need quite so many engineers in that space is because of the increased capacity and also the convergence between them. We also converged testers into technologists and developers and stuff. So it's happening with us. it's also happening with some of our clients, and it's also happening with, I mean, I've been giving a talk about role convergence for about the last 18 months, but people have come up to me at conferences and gone like, I heard your talk about a year ago and we did it and this is how it's working for us. And I was like, good. Yeah. Like, cause it worked for us. So hopefully it works for you. I mean, like it's the move from the theoretical into the actual. And then there's this sort of general drifting towards it. And it kind of quite often happens when you've got, let's imagine you've got a Scrum team of 10 people, you can break it into 2 5s, and then the 2 5s become a couple of 3s and a 4, and that's cool. And then you get this kind of fluid reshaping of teams. So you're reshaping based on capability and capacity and the skills, rather than reshaping based on some kind of big, massive plan. So people fold onto the work rather than the work is shaped onto the people.
Yeah. And that sounds great. And like, that's, I think that makes sense as a vision. What challenges or what downsides have you seen along the way, or what's the, or has it just been plain cruise sailing all the way straight to AI enablement?
So AI enablement has a whole load of challenges to get to. So one of the first ones is a craft pride thing to get over. And by that, I mean, I have been doing that job for 10 years. I know better than that goddamn machine how to do it. So therefore I will do it the way I've always done it. And that's fine. And because you still need people with crafts, you have to respect crafts, you have to respect the knowledge that comes with people. You can't assume that the system will know how to do what your best designer does or your best software architect does or whatever. You need those things within the flow. And so it's working out how do you bridge through that and help people. So generally found like new starters coming through, and so the younger members of the team go like, yeah, fine, good. I'm now multifaceted. The longer in the tooth people, the people with the grey beards like me, are kind of the ones who are slightly harder to change. Yeah. So they have to kind of come through that change cycle, because we used to have this, concept of, kind of journeyman within learning. So I would learn as a junior from a mid-level, and my mid-level would learn from a senior. But if you start to decrease that knowledge piece, you end up with kind of differences in how people learn, and so it's an interesting kind of learning journey in the first place, because lots of people have to kind of get over themselves a bit, but also work out where their purpose and value comes from, because a lot of people attribute purpose and how they are to what they do. And if what they do is now no longer that thing anymore, it's now been moved to the side, and it's sort of like the coded bit or the detailed design bit, or whatever was the craft they had and which gave them their mastery, has come under a lot of stress. And so this is why quite often we find when people are adopting AI, they keep their core mastery as a sort of less augmented thing, and then they augment with adjacent things. And so therefore you'll find like product people who never wrote code at all are augmenting into software engineering. Yeah. And so therefore they're using things to generate that bit, but they kind of don't change so much of their core mastery. And so there's a challenge in terms of kind of craft and mastery that comes with adoption. There is obviously a cost. And kind of you have to have tools, you have to have the right tools. There are so many tools that it's hard to kind of work out which ones you should enable people with. And as I said, like I am a group CIO as well, so I also have to work out like how much they cost and how secure are they. Yeah. So like I remember when DeepSeek first came out, and everyone went nuts about it. Like we must do more stuff with DeepSeek. And then we went, what's happening with that data? Where does that go now? Have we got a contract with them? Do we know what's going on there? And then we're like, okay, well, we don't, so we need to secure ourselves. And so there's sort of like a mastery thing, there's a kind of technical thing. And then there's the kind of core historic behavior thing, because if people have a tendency to do what they did before again, because if it worked before, it'll work again. But then you end up with these kind of conversations of like, what got us here won't get us there. I guess a Marshall Goldsmith kind of quote, but it's sort of that is where we are now, and I think it's similar to how again, I'm showing my age. Back in the early 2000s, we started to do Agile adoption, and it's trying to convince people who did traditional project management at that point that Agile was the thing, but they still wanted to do traditional project management, and that was because that was where they had come from, and so maybe that does link to the craft thing again, I suppose. But anyway, so there's a lot of challenge to it, but it does lead to higher performant, happier current state teams.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I've got like now a list of 25 questions that comes out of that thing. So I think we'll be good for the next hour. But just to add a 26th, I remember when I first started being a Scrum Master, and I read Lisa Adkins's Coaching Agile Teams, and it sounded like for her, and I imagine for others, like Agile came along and solved the bits of being a project manager that they hated, like having to be a dog with a bone and driving the team and whipping them and making them do all this stuff, and they didn't really like it. We respect you, but we don't really like you, and you're really hard work was what you needed to be a project manager. And Agile came along and said, actually, we can focus on the team bit and trust them to do it. And then when you learn how to do that, you get to do all the enjoyable parts of your job, which are working with people and working with teams, and like let all the difficult, horrible bits be taken care of by this nice self-organization that you've fostered. However, like with AI adoption, this is taking the part of the work that people really enjoy, the software craftsmanship, and potentially giving to, well, not in what you said, which is interesting. So this is the perception maybe is that now as an Agile coach, AI comes along and now I'm doing like less facilitation, or I'm doing less people stuff. And so I don't know, is that coming true again, that no, don't worry everyone, AI will come and help us focus on the parts of our job that we enjoy the most? Or is there a bit of, it might take away some of the parts of the job you enjoy the most? And like a sub-question within that was, you said what we're seeing is people keeping the craft part of their work. Do you see that as a problem, or do you see that as a essential, or just part of it? Or
there's it's a challenge for people to drop that craft piece, because it's how they got here, but it's also when you start to talk to teams about AI adoption, like one of the first things you say, well, like AI is going to help you do all this kind of trivial stuff and all those sorts of things, and it kind of does that, and so that is the capacity increase piece. So I can automate, I can parallelize, I can do more of what I know. And people like the concept of that. There was a meme that was going around, which was I wanted AI to do my dishes and do my laundry, not write music and create art. So it's sort of in that, and so you have that kind of some of that conversation with people about adoption. But in the end, some of the things which may have given individuals purpose might not need to be done. And so the software engineering one is the easiest way to talk about abstraction. So if at the moment we're using a fourth level abstracted software engineering, object-oriented language, like we're writing stuff in JavaScript or Java, whatever, it has a structure, and we're moving away from what that structure is into effectively a fifth level abstraction, because I've got a interaction between that, which is something that's going to make that. And that's fine, because it's already a fourth level abstraction. So that engineer is not writing binary. So they're already abstracted from it. And so therefore all we're introducing is another level of abstraction. And so if they were really, really super keen on making the computer do exactly what they want to do, which is they're thinking, like, then they should be like punch cards and binary writing, and rather than like how you go through kind of different levels of abstraction through. So I
think that will like settle as time goes on. People will be like, okay, this is the new way we instruct computers. We have multiple agents running in parallel, and that's what it means to be a good software developer. Okay.
Yes. And at some point you need to go to the level below abstraction to try and work out what's going on with it. Yeah. And that if we abstract to like a sixth level, we end up in this sort of like God machine concept of like, I don't know how any of this works, but it's still working, and just keep feeding the machine. You end up in a slightly weird place, but we've got to be able to go back through that abstraction if we needed to, because if you look at how kind of software engineering ends up, like what the thing that people get purpose from and enjoy is not knowing the syntax. It's not knowing how to structure it. It's not the joy of typing. It's problem solving. It is kind of thinking about the kind of constructive thing I've got to do. Some of it is interacting with other people. So some people want to go and talk with other people and think about that and how do you solve the problem. And so we're abstracting people away from things which are already abstracted from punch cards binary. But the same kind of concept can happen within other disciplines as well. So you move away from the things which are needed, the necessary actions, and you move to the higher level abstracted things you're doing. So in design, like you may have already drawn 500 different versions of a footer, and AI can do that for you. Yeah, because it can do that. What you as the human need to abstract yourself to is evaluating which one's the best one. Yeah, it's evaluating what one is the one that's right for this scenario, these customers, that sort of evaluation piece. So evaluate is one of our core words from an AI usage point of view. So if you can't evaluate, you can't apply critical thinking to it. And so similarly, then you kind of talk from kind of Scrum Master, Agile coach point of view, so do I really need to write some status report because the PMO wanted something, and I can automate all that gubbins away, and therefore I can actually go and spend my time talking to people and actually coaching, rather than being that kind of weird hybrid of coach, project manager, Scrum Master thing that has occurred over time as organizations have compressed and stuff happened. So it's about finding the things which add value that humans should do those. And it's about working out which bits are within your flow, within the thing you're doing, you or your team and your team of teams, that can be moved into AI capacity. Or if you can't do them at the moment, they're increased by AI capability.
Are there examples you've seen of where people have taken AI to help them with the craft, like the irreducibly craft elements of their work, and sort of help with that? So I'm thinking of, as a delivery manager, as an agile coach, people who've used AI successfully to help with the bits of their job that can't be done by AI, but they use AI to help them, or things like that.
You can have like interesting, like the coaching. The coaching one's an interesting one, because the trend has been the number of agile coaches to team ratio. Yeah, like those sorts of numbers. Like back in the day when I was running our coaching function, we were running at about 1 to 5, yeah, like at an agile coach. Each of the team had a scrum master and that kind of stuff, but they also had a coach who would kind of help them. I've worked with some of our clients who are like 5 to 300 teams, yeah. So they've got 5 coaches for 300 teams, and all that means is that the coaches are just doing, they're parachuted in, sort a problem out, coach stuff, and then they're ripped out again and then sent off on another mission. They're the sort of like the SAS of coaching people, and they only go where the actual mission has to happen. And that's a reality in many organizations, because they've gone like, well, this is a value add. No, it's not. Actually, this is important. And so in those scenarios, waiting for a personal human agile coach versus having the agile coach build some level of model which has got their views, input, principles, etc. So really basic kind of like context prompting for something. You can talk to something that's a bit like the coaches that you might see, but because there's only 5 of them to 300 teams, you're not going to see one of them, but you can talk to a thing which is guided by them. Yeah. So it's coaches building AIs to do coaching. And then talking to that, having a conversation with that as an individual, I can talk to it at 10 o'clock at night. I can talk to it at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to wait until I get to the actual human agile coach. And will it be as good? No. Yeah. And I categorically, I'm not saying like that's how agile coaches disappear, but it does mean I can have a conversation and I can start to have some of that thing. As long as you've got the guardrails in, because you could go and talk to a generic AI and it would have a good go at giving you some input. But if you're in that kind of central coaching function, building that feels a bit like you're trying to, it's like turkeys voting for Christmas type of stuff. But if you don't, all that's going to happen is they're going to make like a worst one anyway. Yeah. So someone will go and do it. And then you suddenly don't have any space in which to work. It's as the coaching function. So instead of losing control of the virtual me, because they've already made one, you know, like that. And so for me, I think there is a very definite space right at the moment for, Agile coaches, delivery leads to guide the creation of things that do stuff which is worse than them, but is always available.
Is that happening? Are you seeing that work well? Are there people who are using Agile coaching bots? Based,
yeah,
is that
yes. I mean, and it comes to a capacity challenge, doesn't it? Because if you've got the best Agile coach and they're always on tap and they're always available, then you talk to them. But if you don't, then you need something generally. Because again, I think everyone still strongly believes that open coaching questions, being able to kind of have that conversation, is valuable, even if you have it with a human or not a human. Because it's actually about me rather than the coach themselves. Yeah. So they're not trying to impart knowledge. Otherwise they're a mentor trainer, which is fine. If you want a mentor trainer, you can also get it to mentor and train you. But it's those sorts of things. I think there is opportunity in there. And so and digital as an example, we have a set of Agile coaches. They are tinkering in this space. Yeah. So they are trying to work out how this happened. But it's also, if they don't do it, what will happen is someone less knowledgeable, less skillful will go and do it anyway, or someone will just find something on the internet and start talking to it.
Yeah, because that was the next question I was going to ask, is like, how do, in these AI-enabled micro teams or in these crews where you do have people stepping into domain areas that they don't know enough to know what they do and don't know about, I roughly have enough Agile coach knowledge to know if I'm giving a stupid bit of Agile advice, or if I'm reading it or something like that. But if I start writing code, I don't know enough to know, yep, that makes sense. As an example, I was tinkering around with trying to make a like electronic circuit board based meditation timer, and I asked ChatGPT about it, and it was like, here you go, here's how you could do it. And he goes, would you like me to draw you a circuit diagram? I said, yeah, great. And it drew me a circuit diagram. I went, brilliant. So I showed it to one of my friends I said, look at this circuit diagram. And he was like, this is the most cursed thing I've seen in my entire life. And it was a circuit diagram where like none of the wires connected to anything. Some of them that just like changed color in the middle of the thing. Like none of the components were labeled. There was just random text all over the place. And I literally looked at this and thought, isn't it brilliant that ChatGPT can make a circuit diagram for me? I am an entrepreneur now. So how do you deal with that happening? Yeah.
So it's good enough to get past the first nudge test and go, like, it looks like the thing I wanted it to do. And this is where we kind of come back to that kind of word I was using earlier about evaluation and critical thinking and deciding. And one of the directions we're seeing people travel is from the engineering side up from the kind of solution space into the problem space, because they can evaluate the output rather than going the other way round. And so if I'm a software engineer, I can start to AI augment myself into a product space or a design space. And again, the product bit I'm doing from an AI augmentation or the design bit is not as good as having a person doing it. But if I don't have a person, and if I'm a startup and I've only got 2 people, then I don't have a full-time designer or a full-time product person, and I can move into that space. But the reason we're seeing that the engineers can move that way is because if the output is code, they can evaluate that. Whereas if you go the other way round, where you're coming from a kind of product or delivery or design point of view, and you don't understand how the code works, and you generate some code and it works, and this is the kind of lovable V0 into production and then run stuff type of world, then how do you move it on? Yeah. And in the medium future, I think people will be less concerned about that. But at the moment, there's this sort of weird transition of like people moving from their current domain space to some other domain space and asserting that they understand how it works. Like they've got a circuit board, which looks like a circuit board, but it's not really. Or it's some code that sort of looks like it works, but actually it's got like spaghetti security holes all over it. Or it looks like a design for something, but actually all it's done is kind of rip off some other people and some bad design patterns. Yeah. So being able to evaluate the value of the thing that you're doing is really important. But it's going to happen. And so Simon Wardley's current run of talks kind of gets you to this point in like about 3/4 of the way through it. And like, this is inevitable. So you need to work out how to make the inevitable AI augmentation and extension of what we're doing. How do you make it so it works for you and it doesn't cause too many problems? And I obviously somehow map that kind of thing, which is great. I was watching that talk when we were in Edinburgh end of last year, and I was going like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm convinced. I mean, I was already convinced. I'd given the talk about AI during the day anyway, but I was convinced at that point that I could convince other people. I remain convinced because like sometimes Simon like stands up and says something and go like, oh, I didn't think that before I came in, and now I think differently, but I kind of remain convinced. But the interesting thing that he was kind of getting to was like, well, this is inevitable. So how do you do it in a good way? Yeah. How do you do it in a human way? How do you maintain sovereignty and all the kind of interesting kind of like next level things that we're going to face into? Not so sort of like there's a quote from Jurassic Park, so it's not whether you could do it, it's a question of whether you should have done it. Yeah, and it's those sorts of things, and like should we be doing stuff? It's those slightly more existential kind of questions about these things, and so we're moving in that direction. But what do we need to do to make it safe, secure, have good biases, have the better, not even good biases, like less bad biases, and how do we manage those sorts of things, and how do we think about that for the now and the medium future, because this isn't going away. No matter how much craft I want to be doing, like in 10 years time, nobody's going to care if that code was written by a human or not. Nobody will ever know. Yeah, like it's not like sort of having craft beer, although craft beer sort of became mainstream anyway, so it got commoditized anyway. But like craft code, like it's sort of not going to be a thing. Yeah, like there are crafts of coders. Yeah, but the actual output ends up like down the abstraction back into the machine.
Maybe, yeah, like I agree that trend will happen. But then if you think about, I don't know, when someone like there's a painting that I'm looking at now that my girlfriend made, and she made it, and it's like really beautiful, and people comment on it. When I say my girlfriend made it, they go, wow. And if I'd have said to them, yeah, we got an AI to print that out, they'd be like, oh, okay. Yeah. And so that's the case with lots of things now. You know, I handmade this spoon, or I got a Japanese craftsman to make this knife. Whereas I could get one from IKEA, and I could get one that cuts 99% as well from some German factory. But we as humans like value that human element. So maybe like there's an element of craft coding that will be, hey, look, I made this game and I wrote all the code myself. And they'll be like, wow, you wrote all the code like in the old days, like in the 2000s.
Yeah,
like, yeah. I didn't get an AI to do it.
And then I'd ask them to make the punch cards.
I'm not saying that's a good thing necessarily, but I'm the way I think there's a distribution of like outputs from all these things, and there probably are some people who play with punch cards, or there are some people that have made.
Absolutely. I ran into a guy at a meetup the other day, like who's like runs the EMAC kind of community around the world, and it has all that kind of stuff. I was going like, that's really interesting. So you're running a community of people who like old tech, which is cool because it's nostalgia, yeah, and it's those sorts of things. And so, but like, does anybody do those sorts of things actually for a business? The answer is no. Yeah, because that
Other than a tiny
things
proportion who will be,
who want to do it. I mean, like you look at the traditional industrial revolution, and before the industrial revolution, like people just carried on working all the time. They had Sundays off and stuff. Industrial revolution came along, productivity happened. Some people got very, very rich. Trade unions formed, but at that point we ended up with weekends. Yeah. And so there's this drift in terms of productivity, and whether it's AI, whether it's a combination of AI, quantum, fusion, that leads to kind of the future kind of position and stuff, where we have to get towards kind of universal income. We have to think about 4-day working weeks, and there's a whole different thing that this is accelerating. And this is why I'm kind of as excited about the AI transformation that I was about the Agile transformation. As the Agile transformation was sort of 4 or 5 years into my career, I'm like, this is cool, this is brilliant. And I kind of assumed that we'd get one of those like every 4 or 5 years. Yeah. Like DevOps sort of happened. And then some people tried to do some Web 2.0, Web 3.0 and all that kind of stuff. And blockchain happened, but nothing has excited me quite as much as what is going to happen with AI. And that's why I love talking about it. I love talking to people about it, getting views and opinions on stuff. It's brilliant.
Yeah, because I noticed, like, part of the reason having you on is, like, I notice in myself, if someone said, hey, we've looked at it and we're going to switch it all off, I think I'd be like, thank God. And like, I notice a lot of fear in myself about this stuff. And the biggest fear comes from the fact that my job doesn't seem to have changed very much at all, other than like when I'm running a workshop now, I like put it through an LLM and say like, you know, either spell check this for me or give me a couple of other ideas. But like my job collating ideas and getting people and moving things along and coaching looks very much the same. So I'm kind of worried, 5 years from now, all of a sudden it'll all disappear, and that's all sort of happening. And that's why part of me is like, okay, let me find someone that I know is like gets it, would probably get my world, and also is excited about it. And let's have Stuart on, who can try and not try and sell me on it, because that's a bit too. But, at least like give that voice and try and explore like what's there here for us that's exciting, that's something we can get behind, and don't just have to be concerned about the disruption. Even if we are also concerned about the disruption. If
you don't face into the risks, if you don't face into the risks on learning, relearning, reskilling, the risks on homogenous products, so Gen AI is really good at making things like things it seem. So therefore, you're going to end up with homogeny in that, but you also end up with kind of homogenous kind of code, which leads to potential kind of code collapse and stuff. There's a whole load of kind of interesting things, but more importantly, the sustainability full stop is a real problem, because you look at like how much the hyperscalers are building more data centers and more compute, and you look at like Nvidia's numbers and stuff, like okay, so we need more and more, and so everyone go, well, and it'll bottom out at some point. No, it won't. So you end up in kind of Genrom's paradox, like as the cost of something goes down, the increase of use of it goes up more than the cost balance of it and stuff. So you end up with this kind of position where we're doing more and more and more. But I'm positive, because I believe that AI potentially helps us towards fusion. And the time we live in when fusion might come round and actually we start to get that to a productive point. It's always been 20 years away. It's all maybe 30 years away. Maybe it's 10 years away now. And maybe with the introduction of better AI and quantum, it gets closer. So therefore we start to solve one of those final, not exactly problems, but like if we can deal with the energy piece, then a lot more of this becomes open. And so it's exciting. Like, so it gets us to a Star Trek future. So Star Trek, I'm sci-fi geek, obviously, but so there's no money. You do things which are great for you. There's like that. That's how the Star Trek world works, unless you're a Ferengi, obviously, or because they like gold pressed platinum. But this is where I think we're at the moment, and I know we've kind of abstracted away from kind of teams and stuff, but that at a kind of organizational level is really interesting. So because actually again, coming back to the Industrial Revolution, productivity went up, people got rich, everything else. There are probably many more horizontal people getting rich out of that. The worry at the moment is there's sort of 5s and 10s of people who own all of that. That's a bit more of a worry. Geopolitics is a bit weirder now than it probably was then. And so there are interesting things you can pull from kind of like history, but also we're not going through that time. Yeah. And so as a positive, I think there are really interesting stuff that everybody can get involved in, as long as people are conscious of using it for the right thing. So stop making cat memes, stop using AI as Google, because it costs, someone said in a talk the other day, it costs 55 times the amount of energy to ask Gemini to do something than just to Google it, because the Google bit's coming from a big database and a big index and stuff. So just use the right tool to do the right thing. And as it stands at the moment, the cost of usage doesn't generally reflect back to the individual, because we can all go to Gemini or Copilot and ask it things and get it to do stuff. And that to us is exactly the same cost, but the actual cost in the other end of it is much higher. And so until that cost of usage gets reflected back onto us as individuals, we won't feel it.
This was another question I wanted to ask. A friend of mine who is he's founder, CTO of his startup, where they're all very AI, everything's in Claude code. And he pointed out an interesting, direction that I wanted to ask about, which is with these AIs, you are giving them context, and the more context you can give them, the better. And if I got the AI to understand the context once, I kind of want to get as much done within that context window, because I'm paying per usage of Claude as possible, which means that whereas software development, for as long as I can know about it, which, until recently, was always about breaking stuff down, making things smaller, simpler releases, continuous integration, testing tiny bits of code and throwing them out. Now we've got a dynamic where the tools that we're using and the individual cost of them, like you pay per query or per per request to Claude, now is encouraging people to batch code together, which in our Agile world is like, that's very dangerous, because now all of a sudden I'm batching stuff together. It's harder for me to learn what's working. It's harder for the AI to learn. And instead you're just pulling the slot machine, and it's going,
it's a big batch. Okay. So,
I guess the question is like, is that true? Is it a problem? What do you think about that?
So it's useful to separate how Claude works out from others. So the Anthropic guys still believe in smaller batch sizes and how Claude works. So that's how they approach it from Anthropic side. But I completely agree in terms of people throwing like whole code bases into Cursor, and having to consume that as a kind of vectorized version that you're going against. So yes, to an extent, less in Claude. Just because of that's how Claude works, and Claude focuses more on smaller local context than on universal context. You could use Claude exactly the same way if you wanted to, but it's not that we had a talk from the Anthropic guys on Wednesday, and they were going like, yeah, ours isn't like that. It's like this. But so, there is a threat to that of I ask it to do everything in like as few tokens and in fewer hits as possible. The challenge you get is it does everything, and you like 80% of it, but not 20% of it. And there's 20% of it you don't know what it's done, and you don't like it. And so there still is a desire for having test-driven thought process. So having modularity, having kind of good software engineering pattern that comes through it. Because if you just ask, anybody can go in and give it some context and ask it specific things and one-shot prompt with big context, you won't get what you need. and it works for building prototypes really quickly, good, but it doesn't work for dealing with legacy code bases. It doesn't deal with like strong interactions and how applications have to work with each other and that sort of side. So yeah, yes, to an extent, because I know the problem you're describing. But I think it's a bit more in the prototypey hacky space rather than in the software engineering side.
I've got a big code base and I'm finessing and trying to get it to do what it needs to do on a bigger scale.
Because what we're ending up doing is writing architecture, as in describing the architecture, and then that is the context rather than the code being the architectural context. And there's an interesting challenge you get with this, because actually the code is the architecture and the architecture is the code and everything along those lines. But if you want it to be something different to what it is, then you need to write it, because then the large language models can consume that as context and make edits based on that versus that, rather than it producing stuff that's like the stuff you've always got. Yeah. And so if you want to re-architect things and make things which are new and novel and different, you need to do it in a different way. If you just give it the code, it will just make stuff like it. It will make it better, but it also will just make loads of it like it.
Yeah. Okay. I want to zoom out a little bit and think, okay, we've explored the space a little bit of where you think we are, where we're going. What would your advice be to either another CIO who wasn't quite on the early bandwagon as you were, a Scrum half equivalent? I'm leading the technical part of an organization and all this stuff is changing. What would your advice be to them? And then what would your advice be to those levels going further down, the journey person type person who's like, I've been doing this job for 15, 20 years and I'm really good at it, and all of a sudden it's changing in front of me. And then all the way down to your junior new person who's like, I don't know how to do any job. This is just all I see. How do I get as good at it as possible? Because the advice is different and the scale of the type of problem they're facing is different. Yeah.
The CIOs, I don't think, get any choice in the medium term, as in because things will just change. If they are not adopting, so what will happen is just their boards will find someone who will make it happen. And so therefore they need to kind of get involved. How do they get involved? Generally by trying things, doing things personally. So I learned to code at university. I wrote a bit of code, realized I was actually much better at organizing people and stuff and thinking things than writing code. But I now, every time a new tool comes out, like when Google Anti-Gravity came out, I spent a weekend playing with stuff and building things and making stuff. It ends up working. I wouldn't put it live because I know it's probable garbage, but I got into doing those sorts of things. And then so when Anthropic started talking about MCP, we started kind of gluing things together. So if you don't, then the risk is that you end up as the sort of the Luddite, the person who doesn't know how those things work. So that's at the kind of the senior level.
Can I just pause you to try and define? So, for an agile, non-technical person like me, an MCP is.
So MCP is Model Context Protocol. So it's how AIs can talk to each other and share context. So if I've got an AI which is running my coding and I'm using Claude Code, I can also get it to have a conversation and share context with Figma or Miro. And we can then do kind of product in Miro. We can do design in Figma, and it shares context. So it's about how it connects with each other. It shares context. It's also how the AI connects with other tools. So if you need to get the AI to go and do some other stuff like search the internet or send some emails through whatever else, it can connect in those sorts of senses. So it's kind of APIs for AIs. So how they connect with each other. So we all kind of get how APIs connect applications, but MCP is sort of at that kind of AI to AI kind of thing. There are other protocols. So A2A is agent to agent, which is more driven by Google on that side. It does a similar-ish thing, but slightly different in how it works. And so therefore, there's lots of these other different protocols which are around. And so gluing things together is useful with MCP. Will MCP be the thing that we use forever? Don't know. But it's kind of the current thing now. So, or for the last year and a half at least anyway.
So if you're a CIO, CTO, and you don't know what these things are, you don't know how to string them together, then get on that, because you're going to be asking people to do it, and you need to know roughly what they're talking about.
Exactly. So that was the top level one. What was the middle level?
I guess we can either it's the, I don't know, some sort of middle/senior management, or it's the most senior technical people. I don't know. Where are you seeing? I'll leave it to you. Where do you see the need for that change or for that encouragement at those different levels?
So the senior technical people are already in it, are doing it, and you're kind of having to. Sometimes they're the people who feel that they're being throttled a little bit, and maybe the middle ones as well, to be honest, as well, because they're trying to move faster. They want to use the new thing. They find a new protocol. They want to go and do something, and you kind of, that sometimes they feel they're constrained a bit by the organizational boundaries which are put in place. The kind of middle management is interesting, because again, like the amount of management, and people use the word orchestration. I don't like the word orchestration, but the organization of things. I much prefer a concept of a jazz ensemble than an orchestra, because an orchestra is generally a person with a stick shouting at people. Because that's how orchestras work. And a jazz ensemble is more fluid. Yeah. And so what we'll be talking to people about what their change needs to be is like, someone goes, you must do lots of orchestration. And you're like, yeah, the metaphor doesn't work. What you want to actually be is trying to help coach people to work as jazz ensembles, rather than telling people what to do, because that goes back to command and control and all those sorts of things. So that's at the kind of mid-level. And I know that's nothing to do with AI, that's to do with humans. Yeah. But it's sort of, don't go back to command and control just because the thing underneath is different to where you were before.
And if anything, the thing underneath is going to be moving so fast and so autonomously, and so that you'll be much better off playing a role connecting rather than conducting.
Yeah, and directing. Yeah, because like if you're telling people what to do, at some point the thing you tell them to do will definitely be the wrong thing. So therefore, you need to be building the environment, the shaping, So let's go back to sport again. You're making sure the team has a good pitch to play on. You're making sure they've got clean shirts. The rugby ball they're playing with is good. They've got a good ref. These sorts of things is what people need to be doing in that. And again, what I'm describing is nothing to do with AI. What I'm describing is servant leadership at a level. And so it's like those sorts of things, and it doubles into that, because because otherwise, like, doesn't matter how I say I coach rugby teams, so I've shouted at rugby teams from the side. Does my shouting make them do something different? Maybe it makes me happier. Yeah, because I've articulated my desire for them to do something, but could they choose to ignore me? Well, I've coached from 5-year-olds to 18-year-olds, yeah, and all years of that, some of them will just absolutely ignore you. Yeah, no matter if you're completely the most clear, correct instruction, because you're not on the pitch, you're not playing the game. And so for me, that's what the middle management should be doing. They need to work out how that happens, and that's coaching. Yeah. So, and
that's also what we've been in our type of work been advocating for 2 decades nearly, is like our role here should be to enable autonomous teams. That's the part of me that goes, actually, maybe my job is not going to change in a huge amount fundamentally, and it would still be encouraging the people with levers on that kind of power to enable and to connect rather than to conduct.
There's just that you're the coach on the side of the rugby pitch. There's just some robots on there as well now.
The analogy I was thinking of was the difference between a carefully directed piece of music or something orchestrated like that versus, on TikTok or on I think on threads on Instagram, where someone will play a piece of music and then someone else will improvise on that piece of music, and before you know it, you've got a sort of 12-part self-organized orchestra Or,
Absolutely.
a cat will make a noise and then before you know it, someone's turned it into a song. And like, we should be encouraging the infrastructure for that to happen and to spread so that people can build on each other's things rather than trying to direct our own perfect
And what you
musical.
tend to need from that is heuristics and principles, which is sort of how crews develop as well. So it's really interesting when you kind of look at kind of like what a jazz ensemble does. Because a jazz ensemble, when they get together, like they may not know each other, but they can jam. Yeah, they can make the music work because there is some set of heuristics within there and some level of kind of principled rules, but it's not direct instruction. So you end up with creativity space created rather than it being, you must play this piece of music from Mozart because that's the note you have to play at that point. Yeah. But the structure of the music gets to a creative space. So that's why I quite like the openness of crews and ensembles and etc.
Yeah. So if we just hang out there for a second, so like it's maybe what Dave Snowden would call like enabling, or at least what Aurelio was called enabling constraints, where the sort of the chord progression in the jazz piece that you're playing is present. You have to respect that. Even if you're not playing those chords, you have to play around those chords in the jazz ensemble. Yep. You have to play within the constraints of the timing. You have to play the constraints of it being your turn and for however long you sort of get in the context. And then you can do whatever you want. And those are enabling constraints. What in the team context are those enabling constraints that allow a crew to form and be able to work well with each other?
Again, like you come back to kind of sort of the core of Agile principles again, don't you? Because you read through the Agile principles and you go, okay, cool, that stuff is all still good. Yeah, like the Agile manifesto, good. Yeah, I like those things, all that kind of stuff. How people are working with each other needs some level of structure because, if a team turns up to play a sport and one of them thinks they're playing football and the other one thinks they're playing rugby, there's going to be a problem. And whereas if you've got the laws of the game, from a rugby point of view, the rules are called laws for some reason, but then that helps you play the game. Yeah. And so those are the sorts of things. That's exactly what an enabling constraint is, because it actually allows me and you to interact in a way which is common. It allows us to have a second level conversation rather than understanding what the law was. Yeah, understanding what the kind of base rules set were, because we know those rules and we can play the next thing. And so Agile principles is one of those sorts of things, but it's also kind of cultural norms within organizations, because they become how people work to each other. It's like, what do we do about remote working? What do we do about inviting AIs into our meetings to take notes? Yeah, what's our cultural norm with all these different things? And those are the things which then you agree, and then you do the thing on top of them.
And since the AI revolution has kicked off, has the flavor of those norms, rules, constraints changed, or is it roughly the same thing, just with a different set of tools?
I think those norms are fairly similar. I just think the things that have to abide them may not all be human. So, because we haven't got like fully autonomous agents that go off and magically do everything and stuff. So it's about like if I used to have 10 people and they all were a good Agile team and they knew Agile principles and they kind of followed those things, they had cultural norms and social norms. You've then got 3 of those people in a triad who are working together in an AI augmented thing. How they interact with each other will still be in that Agile way. It'd be interesting to kind of know what the Agile principle adoption is of their agentic sidekicks and how they're communicating with each other. Because what tends still to happen is like we go into platforms and then we may MCP to each other between them, but the style of my agent isn't quite at that level for me at this point, that it is describing Stuart's coding agent or Stuart's design agent with my heuristics in it, because it still comes into me, and then I interact with you on their behalf. But I think it'd be interesting to see how it does get to that point, because at some point with more autonomy of our agent, I need to make sure that my agent's not being an idiot and follows my values and principles and isn't being nasty to yours. Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me of, I think one of the last episodes I released was with James Pereira, who's a barrister, and he said he runs these teams of 20 people or so on a case for his area of law. And part of what you're expecting there is that those 20 people are not all the people that are working on it. Each of those 20 people has 20 people working with them in their home office or firm or something like that. So who the team is there is this huge number of people, and we're going to, with more agents doing more work within the software teams, essentially have that but digitized. So it won't be that like, this senior engineer is bringing their human team up to speed behind the scenes. They're going to have to bring their agentic team and maybe apply some of the same principles. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and the ethics of how they work with each other is going to be really interesting, because does the ethics I have inferred to my agents reflect on me? I think it does. Yeah. So if I had a team and my team were being horrible, then it reflects on me. And so, yeah, I haven't thought about like the characteristics and attitudes of my AI agent. Interesting.
Yeah. Are you, there's the Talmudics there of, are you responsible for your agent's damages or something like that? Okay. So let's carry on the thought experiment we were doing earlier. So we've done middle management, keep doing what you should have been doing all along. What happens next level down?
So, because if we get down to the bottom of this, then the challenge that everyone presents at the moment is the reduction in the work that is done generally when new starters join teams. Yeah. So the kind of fixing bugs, sorting things out. If we start to kind of compress that down, automate some of that stuff away, if we start to abstract away from those things, how do new starters join teams? How do they learn? And so there's a suitable risk in that, because that's how we've always taught people how to do things. The interesting kind of shift is going to be like, how do new young people get into it, and how do they not just step straight to the mid level? And I don't think anyone's kind of puzzled it out fully yet, because we're 3 years into the Gen AI transformation world. I mean, everyone's been doing like predictive AI for decades, but the Gen AI shift with the advent of OpenAI, that's the bit that's made the big change for most people working. So I think there is a kind of worry at that point. So neither of my children wanted to get into technology. Yeah, maybe I wasn't motivating them well enough to get into it, but like one's gone off to be a doctor and the other one wants to be an explorer. I don't know where he's going to explore, but that's a different matter. But there's a sort of, how do we get people into it? Because we've got kind of this kind of drive to say, actually, we want to have more STEM subject or STEAM subjects, people kind of focusing on this. But then if people then go through that at a kind of school education, university education, and don't have jobs to go to, what have we done? Like, have we set up ourselves for like a failure at that point?
A collapse.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to work out how the what used to happen is, like, so let's imagine you went to Stanford and did computer science. At some point, you'd roll straight out of that and you'd end up in a tech company in Palo Alto. Yeah, and that was sort of the thing. And so it cost you $300,000 to get to this point, because that's how much obviously university and the college in the US kind of costs. But there was a payout to it. Now lots of people are coming through that. People aren't hiring them, because the thing that they were going in to start doing has moved up a bit, because it's been either automated out, and you end up with companies hiring less people. So I do feel worried about that end of where our market is in terms of the people coming through.
The mass displacement. So the message is, if you're a CIO, get on board. If you're a middle management, keep doing what you should have been doing. And if you're coming into a new job, good luck.
Or if you're coming into a new job, then maybe you just go and vibe code your own product and build the thing and be an organization of one, because the ultimate convergent point is, I do all the things. and I have enough AI augmentation to do all of them. Again, it's a bit silly when you start to think about all the kind of different functions a company does, but there is this sort of pulling together in those sorts of things, and I also don't think that because of what's happened with kind of the gig economy, what's happened with how employment has worked, and this was kind of pre-AI, has nothing to do with AI in terms of how that got split up, but I think there'll be lots of different people will do different bits in their lives anyway. But as I said, I do try to work out how this gets resolved, but I don't have the answer, but hopefully we'll find some answers for this, because at some point some people will need to not be working. Yeah. So people get older. Yeah. People move through different life stages. And therefore, if you don't have any people to do these things, has the technology filled that space so perfectly that the one in, one out kind of that thing, or do we end up in a problem?
Yeah. I'm thinking here about also your role on the Government Digital Skills Council, and I guess
Yes.
thinking about this stuff more systemically. So could you share a little bit, and as we sort of come to the end of our session, about how that dovetails with the kind of things we're thinking about?
So And Digital has this mission to close the digital skills gap. So I do a lot of adjacent roles. The Digital Skills Council is a really interesting one. So I've been doing it for about a year now, and it is about what does industry think about this to inform government. It's run by DSIT, so the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. There's a group of us who get together at least quarterly. We have kind of running groups in between. And there's really interesting stuff that we're doing in that. So like looking at what the computer science curriculum should be, for schools, because actually, like, do we need to do so much of that, and how do we inflect, how do we make sure that critical thinking is a thing that is taught in schools, those sorts of things, because we know we need those skills when people leave school, leave university, come into industry. So there's lots of interesting stuff like that, but there was also stuff we were talking to Department for the Health and Social Care about how their digital transformation stuff works. So it's really, really interesting because digital skills permeate everywhere, and the government has announced a new industrial strategy. So the industrial strategy has kind of 8 verticals. When you look at the kind of the ones which are being released in terms of the work plans from them, like the green energy, what they say is we need loads of digital skills. Yeah. And so digital as a vertical, like in the kind of business I'm in, the things we make, the technologies, that has a lot of people who need to be doing digital skills, but they cut across everything. And for digital, you could just say AI at the same time, because they are different things, but they have that. And so we're trying to work out, as a council, like, how does this get done? Because you need so many people, and changing from education upwards takes generations, but the AI is going to change in years. And therein lies a speed challenge. Because, like, to change how universities train people and teach stuff takes about 5 years. To change the computer science curriculum, as an example, it kind of got agreed and discussed, and I think it's been published. I don't know if it's been published, but it's coming in 2028. Yeah, that's a long time away in our world. Yeah, and the curriculum is curriculum, and it will have the new things added to it at that point. But like, those are the sorts of interesting challenges the Digital Skills Council is involved in. And I'm saying the government does a brilliant job trying to kind of orchestrate as much of this stuff. But like, there is a hard difference between the skills and the things we need in industry and what happens in education. Yeah. And there's a long gap between those things, because you can't just teach people, you can't just plug them in like the Matrix and they now know AI.
And on that cheery note, is there anything through our conversation that you've opened up a tab in your mind to come back to that you would kick yourself if you didn't share?
The thing that's made me think most in this is like the ethics of my future AI. Yeah, I'm going to go and ponder that because that's good. Because I like I like how people interact with each other, and they should have ethics how they interact with each other. But the future AI interaction ethics is going to be a really interesting one. So I'm going to go and ponder that. From a human point of view, so if you are not using AI because you think it's moving too fast, the only thing to do is get involved and do some. It is inevitable, unless there's like a catastrophic solar flare, which kind of wipes out all the electricity and all that kind of stuff. Like we are in the agentic world now. So getting involved is important. And there are many tools you can use for free right now. Go and use them, play with them, see how they are. Your organizations that you work with will also be trying to get people to use things. And so there'll be some program and training thing that's going on around that. Otherwise, there is also an interesting AI skills boost in the UK. So I know go out to lots of people in the world, but AI skills boost as a website is really useful because it's got lots of free and nearly free training materials.
Great. We can link that in the show notes.
Lovely.
Thank you, Stuart, for joining us on the Intelligent Teams podcast today.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Intelligent Teams podcast. I've been your host, Daniel Susser. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a good chance you'll enjoy being a subscriber to the Intelligent Teams Substack. It's intelligentteams.substack.com. You'll receive a free weekly newsletter featuring an episode of this podcast or writings about cognitive science and building intelligent teams. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Intelligent Teams podcast. I've been your host, Daniel Susser. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a good chance you'll enjoy being a subscriber to the Intelligent Teams Substack. It's intelligentteams.substack.com. You'll receive a free weekly newsletter featuring an episode of this podcast or writings about cognitive science and building intelligent teams. See you next time.